Welcome to a Spiritual Cartel 20th birthday main chair. This week, I'm pleased to introduce Andy H, who's kindly agreed to come and do this share for us. Andy, it's over to you.
Thank you, Singo, and hi, everybody. My name is Andy. I'm blessed to be a recovered cocaine addict and alcoholic, recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body, with a spirit now that through the connection that you've shown me, you've shown me how to get there, and that's to get to God. I've had a God-shaped hole my whole life, but now it's not like that today. So thank you for my life. Thank you for everything. Thank you for this moment. And I want to thank Spiritual Cartel. I love you all. Love you all. Family, forever. And everybody that's on the call today. Thank you, Josh, for inviting me. Appreciate it. And, I'm here to get into the book, but I do want to get into a couple of things first. I am being moved right now, and I can feel it, and I can share that with you. I am being moved to tears right now. It's going to be one of those days, as God would have it. And of course, it had to start with a discussion of American football, which I didn't say. I'm a New York Jet fan, which means that we haven't won in 50 years. We currently haven't won a single game, and we could go without winning a game the rest of the season. So when you've taught me that God doesn't waste pain, I see that here. I'm just going to have to continue to suffer along, having a team that can't get out of its own way. So today I want to get into the book, The book is the access point. The book is the hinge in which I was taught that you and I, a sponsor and a sponsee, a prospect, two alcoholics or drug addicts can sit together and have an experience every single time, guaranteed. What a solution for us, right? My story I'll get to, because what I'm going to do in a minute is I'm going to try to stay on the table of contents. I'm going to try to stay on the table of contents and bounce as God would have me through the book from the table of contents. Who reads table of contents these days? Well, we do, right? But I'd be remiss not to first welcome anybody that is new, struggling, having a tough time, thinking that they don't belong. Maybe having a great day. Maybe today is the day of all days, right? As my sponsor Jerry would say, well, this too shall pass, right? The idea that today we are all sitting here in this moment, in this space, is an absolute miracle. Bill Wilson wrote, our co-founder for, Alcoholics Anonymous, the big book, that the age of miracles is upon us. Our own recovery proves that. As was said in Game of Thrones, everything you did brought you where you are today, where you belong, home. Sit in this space. Know that you are welcomed and loved. And I can say that I love all of you. And what do I mean by that? I sense myself in you. You hopefully will sense me in you. And there's a sense of community, of oneness, of common problem and common solution. And we recover and we move forward. And we instill this and still others, right? That's the beauty of it all. So it didn't matter that I was abandoned in childhood, that no one knew my abuse, that I turned it on myself, and then no one knew either. I drank enough alcohol, snorted enough cocaine, put enough harm out into the world that by the time I got to you 20 years ago, I was broken. But you showed me that a heart that's in pieces, that eventually gets surrendered, will still find its way to God. And someone wrote this, and I believe this tells my story and maybe all of your stories, that my story is filled with broken pieces, terrible choices, and ugly truths. It's also filled with a major comeback, peace in my soul, and a grace that saved me. So if you're exhausted, if your life has ran out of gas and you feel you've got nothing left, I'm here to tell you that you can help others. Don't take my word for it. It's on page 124 that our dark past is the greatest asset we have. With it, we can save lives. We can meet people forward to have their own experience with the Father of Light and come into the world and now suddenly be able to help others. So you're helping me, you know. I'm hopefully helping you. I hope whatever I say is what God intended me to say, you know, and I had to do something right now that I should have done well, that God is having me do right now, and that's get me out of the way, less me, more thee. Thomas Merton, a incredible spiritual teacher who suddenly came into my life, you know, about 12 years ago. I was sober a while, and then suddenly I come upon a meeting in Chicago, you know, great city, great AA and CA city. You know, I'm somehow sitting next to a guy who's a monk, and he was somebody that was in the Abbey of Gethsemani, you know, where Thomas Merton studied it. And from that moment on, everything's changed. Thomas Merton said, any idea about God isn't. He said that God expresses himself. The first language of God is silence. And he also says something that's so true to us, that we care for ourselves in the service of others. He did give us this prayer too, a prayer of unknowing. My Lord God, I have no idea where I'm going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I'm following your will does not mean I'm actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I'm doing. I hope I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, I will trust you always, though I may seem to be lost in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you're ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone. Amen. Welcome to the greatest love story, you know, in the 21st century and the 20th century. That's what we have here. I'm just a sober guy on duty. You showed me the path is to be a restless God seeker. A restless God seeker, which means that I can't rest on my laurels, right? Laurels are, some people say, amends that I already made, right? Spiritual activity. The job that God has me doing is to engage another alcoholic or a drug addict in spiritual activity so I can live a useful life today, to be of service. You know? And that's a far cry from where I was as a taker all my life. Buy me, bring me, give me. That's not all my life. That's what I was, you know, a good portion of my life, but that's not me today. But I first needed to be a receiver of your love in order to learn how to give. How could I know that? So today, coming in, you know, with some time only means for me that, you know, we talk about these AA birthdays really to show the newcomer that it works. But the reality is, and here's like these paradoxes we have, right? And Bill Wilson expressed it too. He said that to others that he would go to, you know, in the early days, he said, I'm going to show you how to not drink alcohol the rest of your life, one day at a time. So it's a whole bunch of 24-hour periods in a row, a whole bunch of 24s, but it's really about this moment in this day. And what riveted me into understanding this fully was a guy by the name of Bud P. from the Stumbling Forward group of Butler, New Jersey. Passed away with over 60 years of continuous sobriety. And he said, kid, it's life and death one day at a time. If you didn't drink or use today, you tied the record. No one's done it any better. So I appreciate the love, support, and wisdom, the camaraderie, the laughter, and the celebration of today. But what we're really doing is celebrating each other in this moment. I just happen to be here with y'all today. Yeah. And inevitably, the gratitude that comes, we show our gratitude through the buckets of tears that get shed in these rooms, but the gratitude, right? See, the gift of a sober life is just that, the gift of a sober life. And when I express gratitude today, I get to live in the moment, to get to bask in God's glory. And you know, if you ask me what I'm most grateful for, it's the pain, right? The pain that brought me to you so you could bring me to God. And the handrails that you showed me and showed everybody was the 12 steps. So how are we going to ride that seesaw today, right? how we're going to ride the seesaw. There's a song, that came out a long time ago in 1968, right? And it has to do with a seesaw, right? A seesaw has a fulcrum, right, that sits in the middle. And in a way, where am I in a spiritual realm today in this moment, right? For the longest time, there was none of that, right? But now, after having recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body and be riveted and thrown and launched into the realm of the spirit, that's the whole point of steps 1 through 9, to sit in 10, 11, and 12, where God can heal this broken world through me, the seesaw back and forth. So I want to talk about that because I'm not unique, right? That song said something like this: I worked like a slave for years, sweat so hard just to end my tears. Ride, ride my seesaw, take this place on this trip just for me. It's for free. So how do I ride the seesaw today? Well, you've given me things. I want to go to page 52. I want to go to page 52 because, see, that spiritual seesaw is best expressed in the longest version of the description of the spiritual malady, right? I have a 3-part disease. You could say a 4th part. Some people say a 2-part. Good, whatever your experience is. But my 3-part disease is rooted. The other side of the dash in the first step, it's rooted in an absolute thirst for God. Right? See, grateful alcoholics and drug addicts don't drink the beverage alcohol and don't snort cocaine, but the thirst continues for the cups of life that get served in these rooms. Where am I in my relationship with God? How big is God for me today? It's been said by folks like Mark Houston, if you go to the ocean with a thimble, you get a thimble. But if you go to the ocean with a bucket, you get a bucket. And we're given great instructions to be balanced on the seesaw. See, the best way I could describe it is the idea of getting off the beam or floating off the beam always, for me, has pushed me towards a more enhanced and intimate relationship with God. Every time I've been off the beam, suddenly I'm buzzed back. So that seesaw is imbalanced. And what has worked for me, what was taught to me, was to look at page 52, look at the bedevilments. Bedeviled means to be tortured. And I was tortured for years and years by fear, by not getting along with people, feeling useless, couldn't make a living. What we talk about with not making a living could be money, but it could also mean that I can't live with myself or with anybody else. To be sitting in yourself and can't stand the company is a lyric from a Bruce Springsteen song, right? I came to the world like a badly wrapped gift, disgruntled, overwhelmed with fear. So when at age 15, ice cold beer was thrown to me, it riveted me into the moment. That's the great effect it gave me. It allowed me to function. I was pieced together. See, I didn't know what I was missing until alcohol and cocaine entered my life, right? And then it taught me what to do and how to do things and get me through a lot of years when I didn't blow my brains out because I had those things. See, it was an artificial way to a spiritual experience, and you showed me a bona fide way to a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. That spiritual malady, restless, irritable, and discontent. I'm restless, I can't sit still. I'm irritable, I'm easily annoyed, I'm discontent. Wherever I am is not the place to be. But I'm okay if you look at me from the outside in. Those that know my story know I didn't get to you as a hot mess. I got to you as an icicle. I became a hot mess 6 months in, which is for another page, which I'll get to. But the beauty of going back to page 52 now and understanding that is the best description of my separation from God, my search for wholeness, as was said so eloquently in letters between Carl Jung, who gave us the second part of step 1. See, Carl Jung said, he understood we had a low-level thirst for God. He knew that, He knew that we tried the lowest form of poison to reach the highest form of humanity with a substance from the outside in. He understood us as addicts and alcoholics so well. And he wasn't one of us. But back to page 52, where is the seesaw today in this moment? Where is fear in my life? Where am I not being of service when I can be? And it always goes back to turning to God, because see, this is the place where agnosticism likes to run free. It's a great barometer for agnosticism. And today, there are moments. There would not be, a moment that I don't have some level of agnosticism. I'm not perfect. Some days, those seem to be just gliding through the air, right? And other days, seem very, very difficult. Those difficult days I embrace today. Those difficult days are signposts that God will get bigger if I stay in the pain. Someone once said, it's just pain. And it is. But a sober heart can harbor both great pain and incredible joy, as I've shared here a number of times, in the same moment, in the same breath. So moving out of fear, right? Moving out of believing that, my mind cannot stay, my spirit cannot stay in the moment, but gets riveted into the future, and find out that fear is a faulty relationship with God based on self-reliance. Oh, so fear is a decision to rely on myself. Oh, check that with 52, right? And you've given me the answer. You've given me a prayer. You've given me a prayer to ask God to remove this fear at once. And suddenly, I learned to outgrow fear. It's a learning experience. It's a growth experience. How painful is the lesson going to be? It's going to take time. It's going to take time. But to know today that all fears are in the future, there's no exceptions. When it became clear that that was the truth, changed my life in ways that I can't even describe. So in going back to the table of contents, right? That's page V. We're going to talk about the first edition, right? See, we have general info, right? We have general info here in the first, so the first number of pages, right? We have 4 different forwards, right? We have the doctor's opinion, but how beautiful is the forward to the first edition, right? Tells me what I'm recovered from. If there's any confusion as to what I'm recovered from a seemingly meaning, an illusion that's going to kill me, but it's still an illusion. A hopeless state of mind and body. Okay? So I have a body that can't process alcohol, cocaine, and a mind that can't process reality. Yeah. So when folks around here in New Jersey said things like, AA and CA is not a hotbed of mental health, and I said, well, wait a minute, that can't be me, and they laughed. They laughed because, see, when we look at the obsession to use alcohol or cocaine, the second part of powerlessness, which gets described so vividly in, 50, 60 pages, a whole bunch of pages, said in so many different ways to cut through the walls of denial, delusion, and refusal, because the disease is so powerful, right? That mental illness is the obsession, the greatest power that I ever encountered. Greater than a mother's love for her children. I've seen that. Greater than my love for my kids, and my wife. That obsession, when alcohol and cocaine called, I ran. The anticipation of getting that line of cocaine, getting on the highway, going to the dealer, getting it all, and then finally saying, and wanting to go back to that moment when I was age 15 and ice cold beer treated me. At that point, I hadn't discovered cocaine yet. Boy, it's absolutely true. There's a strict spiritual law that the depths of what alcohol and cocaine gave me in the beginning were going to be the depths of what it took away in the end. That was the fact of it all. So I'm hopeless, right? But do I see that I'm hopeless? that took time, right? It took time because, see, if we move now to page 30, and I believe page 30 could be one of the most, well, we like to say we have our favorite pages, but how could I not say that page 30, is not one of the most important pages, because it speaks directly to the state of my mental illness. My mental illness is to continue to chase a power, alcohol, cocaine, that at one point in my life seemed to fix me, seemed to treat me, seemed to allow me to live in this world. And for years and years, I chased that over 30 years. Some of you know my story. New York City club animal, went to all those fun places like Studio 54, the Mud Club, CBGB's, all that stuff. It was great. There's some great moments, but I'm still, at age 42 on the dance floor of a club, the same club I had gone to when I was, 19. It's still there. It's called Webster Hall. It used to be called the Ritz. In any event, I'm standing there drunk and high, right? Waiting for the dealer outside. And, I have a wife and kids at home, and I'm looking around that dance floor and I'm saying, is this all there is? Yeah. I went back to the bar. There wasn't any other answer. And I was to go on another few years before going down to my knees. But the point is that this page 30, is the relapse page. It's the step 0 page that folks in California talk about, right? It's, in a way, the step before the first step is simply this. It's the day of my last line or my last drink to when I'm ready to accept spiritual help. What process has to go through to grind me and all of us to the point of some level of concession, right? Some level of concession, right? How far do I have to go? And I talked about that period of time when I came in and I was, like an icicle. And once I started waking up, I'm an absolute hot mess, because on one level, I'm chairing a big book meeting here on Sunday nights right around here in New Jersey. I'm taking people to meetings, which my sponsor said, I said, I'm carrying a message. And he said, well, you have a car, you're just taking people to the meeting. Jerry was very clear, he was much more interested in my life than trying to impress me. He was the kind of sponsor, and that's what I needed, that would rather step on my toes than step on my grave. He was not impressed with my degrees. I went to a lot of school, and I always loved telling the joke that he said to me. He said, thermometers have degrees. You know where they put them? That was Jerry. So he sat me on this page because I was dying in the rooms around the program. Because, see, there's two. They do overlap. I came in to the spirit of the fellowship. I came into to the warmth and embrace of my home group, the morning after group, Bagels Love and Fellowship every Saturday. A lot of you have come to that meeting and brought it all to another level, spiritual activity. I love you all for that. I came in and, I tripped down the stairs. Basically, the hardest step was the doorstep, and I came in to the spirit of the fellowship, engulfed in what people were just sharing with me. It wasn't just bagels and coffee. It was love and care and concern. And they said a lot of things to me. And the one I remember most is that they told me, we're going to love you until you can love yourself. And that's really the journey here, I believe, is to get to a point where you can look in the mirror, because I could never look in the mirror for years, and look and say, you know what? There's no other person I'd rather be than me. There's no other group of people I'd rather be than with you all. And there's no other moment I'd rather be in this moment. This is where Oscar Wilde comes in. He said a lot of things. He said, you might as well be yourself. Everyone else is taken. He also said, that learning to love oneself is the beginning of a lifelong romance. But first I had to know what was wrong with me. So I'm sitting here, not drinking and using cocaine, and I'm going out of my mind. Because the inner turmoil, the pangs of anxious apartness grew stronger and stronger and stronger. I was hitting a new abyss, of my own wretchedness, I thought that, what, the outsides get better, but the insides got worse without alcohol and cocaine for that period of time, and I'm not using. See, I was at another jumping off place. We talk about the jumping off place on page 152, that you can't live with alcohol or drugs and you can't live without them. But there's another jumping off place that I hit, and I'm not unique. Some of you may have experienced it, where you can't live with CA or AA and you can't live without them. And I got progressively worse. And I sat on page 30, I sat on page 30 and somehow the walls of denial, delusion, and refusal came tumbling down. They were incinerated because, see, in the end, I saw that I had this great obsession, that this power that it's one point, we talk about the great power as, well, we like the effect of alcohol and cocaine, right? Despite it being injurious, we like the effect produced. I love the effect being produced. And I chased that love for so many years. It abandoned me like I had abandonment, issues in childhood. It abandoned me also. And then it became something like a Stockholm syndrome thing where, the great love that is killing me, I still am attached to it. What a power. What a power. So this great obsession drove the illusion, that I could drink like others. And eventually I was deluded into thinking that I still could control and enjoy my drinking and using. Now it has to be smashed. Without it being smashed, without coming to my knees and recognizing that to drink and use is to die, I'm doomed. I'm doomed. And what happened for me was eventually I came to that place. Step 0 ended, and I saw that I was one of you. And that lit me up to now look at step 1 now with fresh eyes. I've often told a story. I was in a parking lot in New Jersey, and a guy by the name of Jimmy Shoes, they put shoes on horses. Jimmy put shoes on horses, so they call him Jimmy Shoes, and he said to me, the party's over. And yet that was the most profound thing ever said to me. And suddenly, time collapsed. God's the author of all truth. And suddenly I'm sitting there and, I recognize that, it's over, it's over. And step 0 ended on that day, So going back to, Bill's story now, let's take a look at Bill's story. Because Bill's story, as we know, is our stories, right? And in Bill's story, there's just so much here. The best description, maybe, of the fact that this is not a disease that, only affects me. We could talk about the fourth part of the disease as saying that, I put harm out into the world, and things need to be made right. Amends need to be made. Because, see, on page 18, it not only talks about that, there's fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers. We talk about words like annihilation, engulfing others, the world. One that I hope to never forget is warped lives of blameless children, and wives and parents. It engulfs, it annihilates all the gentleness, all the relationships that could ever have taken place were never grounded correctly. Turned out I was experienced myself. I was a warped life of as a blameless child growing up. But all those circumstances I can talk to you about. The fact that my mother had 4 husbands, the fact that, husband number 2, my birth father, left us after he came back, damaged from World War II. I didn't know, it's 1962 or 3. I'm 8 and 9 years old. What do I know? And he leaves us. It has nothing to do These are the if onlys. They had nothing to do with husband number 3, a serial domestic violence perpetrator that terrorized us physically, mentally, spiritually, every which way. Has nothing to do with that. Now, those conditions made me thirsty, sure, but that's not the basis for my alcoholism or my drug addiction. And what freedom it is to know that that's the case. Because inevitably, when I go to we agnostics, right, probably, well, I would say one of the best pieces of spiritual literature ever written, right? When I go to we agnostic and I find out quite clearly on page 45 that lack of power is my dilemma. What's a dilemma? A dilemma is 2 bad choices. Kind of like what Dr. Bob says in his Nightmare, Dr. Bob talks about Scylla and Charybdis, right? That ancient Homer analogy, right? Where I always mix this up. I think Scylla is the 8-headed monster, and Charybdis is a whirlpool, and you're sitting in the boat, and which way do you go? You want to be eaten by the 8-headed monster, or you want to go into the whirlpool? That's the dilemma, lack of power. And I'm not going to get power from me, right? Despite my, countless vain attempts. So I had to look for a power greater than myself. And it tells me the beauty of it here. It tells me that this is what this book is all about. And it never ends. This book is a book of mirrors that reflects in a microscopic and a telescopic way, once 2 or more sit with it, the presence of God. And the beauty of it is the problem, as it says here, right? This book is about enabling you to find a power greater than yourself that will solve your problem. Doesn't talk about alcohol, doesn't talk about cocaine or any other substance I might have ingested from the outside in. It talks about me. I'm the problem. What is that? One of the best messages of hope that you could ever imagine. That I don't need to fix anybody. I don't need to control anything. In fact, all those countless vain attempts of controlling, everything on the outside made me sicker and sicker. What beauty. To know that, in the end, the character defects that came up so vividly in multiple inventories, right? We share so many of them. You taught me that it was through steps 4 and 5, this overwhelming desire to control others' lives. We call it people pleasing, getting my sense of who I am by what you think of me. That is crippling. And it's gotten so much better. Multiple inventories have brought me to the place where I can see very clearly that, and this is the beauty of step 6 and 7, if we suddenly, where do you find step 6 and 7? Well, 76, right? That's an easy one. And in step 6, I'm then asked to have the willingness, and if I don't have the willingness, to pray for the willingness to have everything, all of these defects, character traits, shortcomings, whatever you want to call them, good and bad, because I can't tell what's good and bad. That's God's job, is to sort it out, in any way possible, but not through me saying, let's keep this, let's let that go, and if I don't have the willingness, well, I've got the prayer in there to ask for the willingness, right? Because, see, God expresses himself or herself in willingness, and when I'm willing, I'm changed. That's the beauty of it. So in multiple, 6 and 7s, and the great part about 6 and 7 is I have a walking around step in step 10 to continue to make that reed. It's not flimsy anymore. We talk about the flimsy reed, right? When we reach for God, We don't talk about the flimsy reed today. It may be thin, but it is solid. It is enhanced. It is rigorously together today. And with that flimsy reed, I can now connect. I can now connect and ask God specifically in the 7-step prayer to say, God, can you please take away my tendency to do for others what they do for themselves, what they can do for themselves? God, can I ask you, please, to take away my inability to see that there are people in my life that love me the most but understand me the least, and that's okay. God, you've shown me that I need to protect my sobriety. I need to have my sobriety first and foremost, no matter how long, how many 24-hour periods I have in a row, because ultimately it's the relationship I have with you, dear God, that's going to be between me and the thought of the first drink or drug. God, please show me the clarity that that's true. Show me that if I have you between me and that thought, I can live in a recovered state, not cured, but in a recovered state. And I get to be present another day to carry out what you would have me do. God, you've shown me that the two most important days of my life were when I was born and when I found out why. It just goes on and on. In step 10, the beauty of step 10 is that the promises that come, that continue to come for me and for all of us, come in the moment. How about an internal step 10? How about a preventive step 10? You taught me that. Some of the best step 10s I've ever done happened in 10 or 15 seconds, right? Because you taught me that the pause, that dash, that pause, as some folks in New Jersey said, you get one more second every year, something like that, in the pause. But 1 second's a long time. 5 seconds seems like a lifetime. And in that pause, where words and actions, and the actions I mean are things like, just facial expressions when you're not happy. How about that? That was always something, it wasn't so much silent scorn for me, but it was the facial expressions, We had a guy here in New Jersey, Angry Danny. They knew him as Angry Danny because no matter who shared, he would throw his hands down like that. He was always not set, I don't want to be like that. I might disapprove of things, but I can hold it today because, see, if God is sitting there right then and there, God freezes me, right? Just like when, I got caught, I didn't tell you how I got in. Some of you know I got here because I got caught. I got here because I ran out of lies 20 years ago. I was a champion liar for so long. I had a nickname in college, ADB. It stood for Andy Douchebag. A lot of it had to do with my lying. And suddenly I get caught and I run out of lies. God paralyzes the liar in me, has been said in these rooms. If things sound familiar to you, that's good. Because in AA and CA, plagiarism is wisdom, only stupidity is original. God paralyzed the liar in me. And then here it is now in the 10th step. I get to then ask God right then and there to remove these things. To remove these things that are blocking me, not only from God, but from you. If possible, I can discuss. That seems to be the tougher one, is to find somebody right away. Can't do it in those few seconds, though, that you're right there ready to kind of just let loose. But certainly I can watch, ask, and turn, right? To become a turner, right? You showed me that it's in spiritual teachings that turning my thoughts, right, is a sign of spiritual health. And who am I turning my thoughts to? Turning my thoughts to helping somebody else. Imagine that. Somebody that was the epitome of selfishness and self-centeredness. The world rotated around me. In fact, my core delusion was that the world existed for me to be happy. That was the way the world existed. No, the world exists for me to be awakened and present so I can help others. And finally, I think time is starting to go down here. I set my timer too, because as some of you know, I sometimes get enchanted with my own voice, and I'd rather you say thanks for sharing and thanks for stopping. So I know I'm getting close to the end here. I do want to mention one quick thing. What you've taught me over time is that recovery has a cadence, it has a pace, it has a rhythm, and it has geometry. You showed me the geometry in steps 1, 2, 3, right? We talk about the new and triumphant arch, right? With the cornerstone, the base being recovery. The base being recovery, but only at this point, of finding powerlessness in step 1. The cornerstone, step 2, being willingness, and the keystone that keeps it all together is step 3, the arch, which I can walk through a free man. How free do you want to be, you said? But there's more geometry too, and that's in the strict spiritual disciplines of 10, 11, and 12. If we took step 12 and broke it up, because it is a 3-part step that all depend on, that hinge on me being awakened, right? I might be able to practice 11 and 12, but certainly not to the effectiveness God would want me to do if I haven't awakened. But if I've awakened now, right? Having had a spiritual experience as the result of these steps is recovery on the base. The left-hand side would be unity, carrying this message to other alcoholics and drug addicts. And the third part is practicing these principles in all my affairs. And when those sides are all in unison, I can experience at one-ment. I can experience glimmers of the Master's presence, the Father of Light. And trust me, I'm not unique. I'm not unique at all. This is all available for all of us. I'm just one more bozo on the bus, as we like to say. I tried everything else until finally, in the last analysis, this is what worked and continues to work. So to be here today is beyond description. To be with you all, to spend this moment together. Let's continue to ride our seesaws together, huh? To help each other. If there's anyone stuck on page 30, still negotiating, maybe still having a tough time, because in the end, I can only share experience of those that have gone out. I don't have direct experience with those that have gone out, but I can tell you that what I've observed is that once you come into CA or AA, you're never going to drink or use again in peace. I've experienced, as all of us have already, if you've been around for a while, a lot of pain, a lot of tragedy, and a lot of it has to do, when it comes to relapsing, for 3 reasons. One is a first step reservation. The second is failing to enlarge your spiritual realm. And the third is unfinished conscious amends that are just sitting there ready to reverse the steps. This is the greatest love story. This is about love. Stay with us, be with us, reach out to us. We do this together. See, there's no cost in AA. There's no cost in CA, but the charge is service. It's all about creating new sponsors and going out into the world to spread this message. So, one more thing, the Wizard of Oz. Got to talk about the Wizard of Oz, because in the end, there's so much there. I could have talked about Gilligan's Island, because Gilligan Island talks about all of the 7 deadly sins, but the Wizard of Oz at the end has our recovery in mind, because it talks about the power that the deep reality, the Father of light, right? The greatest power ever that resides within all of us, because Dorothy's standing there at the end with Glenda, the good witch of the East, and Toto the dog. And Glenda says, "What have you learned?" And Dorothy says, "Well, there's no place like home." And then Glenda says, "Well, all you needed to do was to click your heels." The power has always been within us. It's always been there. Through the 12 steps, the formula for sobriety, the formula for God, and the formula for the good life, you've unblocked me. And I can finally be who God intended me to be, and that's just one of us. We do this together. So stay close, stay with us. And I should end there. Thank you for listening. I hope I didn't go too far over. I love you all.